Well, Michelle, you know one of our favorite lands to visit when we go to Magic Kingdom and definitely to Disneyland is, of course, Adventureland. I mean, adventure's right in our name, right? I mean, how can it not be? But knowing that, it probably shouldn't be a surprise to anybody that we also love to take a pause and get a little bit of a tropical serenade at Walt Disney's Enchanted Tiki Room. And while, we know a lot of the lore behind that attraction, I don't think we really do know as much as we thought we did, because it's definitely not the whole story, what we've heard to this point, right?
Yeah, 100%. It's one of those things that the more you hear about it, the more you're amazed by it, and very much looking forward to talking about this.
Right, absolutely. Got changes now because we're excited to welcome someone who knows everything. I mean, literally everything about these stories. His name is Ken Bruce, and check out his resume. Ken is a two-time Emmy Award-winning animation director and storyboard artist who has worked on many of the films and television shows you love, including Toy Story 3, Up, The Simpsons, Family Guy, so many more. Hopefully, maybe sometime we'll get to talk to him about those things in the future. But right now, we're here to talk about his incredible book that explores in detail the painstaking work it took to create the groundbreaking attraction, Walt Disney's Enchanted Tiki Room. It's called Before the Birds Sang Words. It's phenomenal, and we're thrilled to say he's joining us now. Ken Bruce, welcome to the Hyperion Adventures podcast.
I am thrilled to be here, thrilled to be invited, and we're gonna have fun. We're gonna have fun because it's a fun story.
It's a fun and extremely much more interesting than I even knew. I mean, I knew it was an interesting story, but much more interesting. We had a chance to listen to your book. We've listened to the audio version of your book, which is great because you narrate it, which makes it even more fun because we get your passion coming through on it. But before we get to the main portion of the book itself, I need to ask you about one of the things that made me say, right off the bat, because
I'm ready.
It was the foreword that was written by the amazing director and writer Brad Bird. And as I was listening to it, something struck me a little bit funny. I just need to know, was it intentional or just a happy coincidence that you had a bird sing before the bird sang words?
That is a really great question, and you're going to be dumbfounded. So I'm in the middle of, maybe about to start writing the book. And there's a Christmas party that I was always invited to for animation people, hosted by Bill and Sue Croyer, who are big names in the animation industry. And Brad's always there. And I was thinking Brad would be perfect to do my foreword because, like me, he's also a bit of an old school Disney nerd, Walt era guy. And we've had plenty of discussions about that. He was my boss, both on The Simpsons and on a show called Family Dog. So I adore Brad in ways you can't even imagine. He's just an amazing guy. And I was like, I went up to him and said, Brad, would you be interested in doing my forward? He's like, and who knows? He might have had 2 beers. And he's like, yeah, I'll be sure. So then, 5 or 6 years later, I'm like, well, I gotta call him on this. And in going through his lovely wife, I was able to reach him and of course, didn't want him to feel like he was obligated to write a foreword to a book that he hasn't read or may not like. So it was all contingent upon that. And then he did. He loved the book, and which was amazing to me because he was the first person who read it, and his validation meant everything to me. I think I broke down when I heard it. No, I did break down. And then he's halfway into writing the foreword, about to deliver it in a day or two, and I realized, holy cow, his last name is so appropriate. And then I thought, I hope he doesn't think I asked him to write the foreword because of his last name. And I furiously sent out a text going, I'm an idiot, but I just realized this. Don't even begin to think that's the reason. And he was like, yeah, whatever. So, but then he makes a joke of it in the foreword.
Yep.
Yeah.
Love it.
Or
I love it so
he
much.
thinks or he thinks I did because of his name. And no, it's because he's the perfect person to write the foreword for this book. It's just that simple.
It's a great start to
Yeah.
what is a phenomenal book for sure.
Yeah,
No,
100%.
he is the perfect person. Yeah.
All right, so Ken, to start off with, what drew you personally to the story behind Walt Disney's Enchanted Tiki Room?
I mean, it starts when you're 7 years, well, it starts when I was 10 years old and saw the show. I think it was 10 years old. Yeah. And I didn't know a tiki room from a bunker. Like the whole bamboo aesthetic confused me. But all I knew was this was a room where magic happened, and it blew me away. And it was one surprise, one carefully crafted surprise after another. And I was wowed by it. And then over time, you know, as a young kid, you start to go, how did they do that? Like, how is that possible? Um, and and then you dig around and then you realize this was the first of its kind. This changed everything at Disneyland. This was 1963. This was before Pirates of the Caribbean or Lincoln or Mansion or Carousel Progress, Progress Land at the fair and Small World and all those big e-ticket attractions that we all know and love. This in its day, and I cannot underline this enough, was mind blowing, and I'm not exaggerating. People didn't know what they were seeing. It was a magic trick, unlike anything known to man. Uh, it's it's people's brains exploded. They believed it. I mean, of course, they didn't really believe it, but their suspension of disbelief happened within the first 3 or 4 minutes, and then they just like, oh, excuse me, a room full
Sorry.
of a room full of birds are putting on a show, and I'm all in. People even confident that the rainstorm at the end was absolutely real. So so context is everything. So yeah, that's me yammering on because because I do that. But yeah, so I knew at a young age that this was probably the most consequential attraction at Disneyland, and that there's an important story to be told. And I always then had my antennas up for the person who was going to write a book about that. Uh, Not a coffee table book, but like I wanted a big ass book that you know I could read about that. And long story short, I ended up being the one to write it um, uh, because it was the book that I'd always wanted to read for sure. Because it's an important story. Again, it did change the tone and timbre of Disneyland. And in fact, it sort of spelled the beginning of Disneyland 2.0 when actually Walt and his people began to really understand what this park was. It was a park that hadn't quite gotten a toehold into what it ultimately was about.
Exactly, exactly. Um, I don't know if you remember from years ago, there used to be this commercial on TV. Remember TV?
Remember TV?
And there was this like weird looking hairy monster like thing, and the commercial starts off that sometimes ideas can start off being ugly, but then they get nurtured and progress despite challenges, and eventually they become something really special and beautiful. And I'm paraphrasing that obviously, but that was the essence. And so one of my takeaways from your book is kind of like this concept,
Yeah,
because you do a great job of really like unpacking the idea that Walt buying this mechanical bird in New Orleans as the origin story of the Enchanted Tiki Room might not quite be
no,
100 accurate, that it's way more complex, and I think you even mentioned less tidy than that. And so how do you think that myth came about, and what's like one piece of real story that you think would surprise people about this development?
oh, there's so many. And thank you for bringing up the myth. Like Disney fans like their tidy, cute mythology stories because they're warm and they're fuzzy, and a lot of Disney fans, Walt is no longer Walt the chain smoker who s- whose fingers smelled like tobacco all day long. He's a deity now. He's a god. So these a lot of these stories sort of back up, that are myths, sort of back up the magical, inception stories. And the Tiki Room was anything but a magical inception story. It was a lot of hard work, and it was also happenstance, and 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 e- evolution, a long chain of evolutionary ideas and missteps, and not knowing what it was, and whatever, lots of chance. How do these stories come about? Because someone tells a story that that I don't know, Disney fans grab onto, and the Griffith Park bench story, and there's so many of them that are warm and fuzzy, but other no, that's not so fast, everybody. Um, so yeah, what was your question? How do these myths start? Yeah.
Well, and something that you think
Oh,
would surprise people about it too.
um, that it didn't just happen, that it was one of those projects that started one way, then in a way, there are so many like parents of the Tiki Room other than this silly animatronic bird, not well, a mechanical bird that Walt buys in New Orleans. You can argue that the father of the Tiki Room is actually a Chinese restaurant dinner show, with a talking, Confucius that has more of a link to the Tiki Room than a little mechanical bird from New Orleans. Um, Walt's uh, Walt's love of mechanical toys goes all the way back to his childhood and his young adulthood. Um, what would surprise people? That the Tiki Room, yeah, I could keep going for hours once I start thinking about this, that the Tiki Room is actually one of the most personal reflections of Walt Disney left,
Hmm.
for sure. Um, Carousel Progress is right up there too.
Hmm.
Um, as far as Walt's sensibility and what makes him laugh and what he's into, the Tiki Room is way up there. Sure, Walt loved pirate stories, but the Tiki Room, as far as its sort of vaudeville burlesque sense of humor, uh, that's pure Walt. Like Walt called the Tiki Room his baby. He did not call the Pirates of the Caribbean or the Haunted Mansion or Lincoln or Small World his baby.
Very
Uh,
good points.
Walt Disney's Enchanted Tiki Room, his name is on it for a reason.
Hmm.
That was his money. That's
Hmm.
another thing. Walt paid for the Enchanted Tiki Room out of his own wallet. That was his own young company at the time. Oh, this is a surprise. You had to buy a separate ticket. Like, you buy your ticket book at the front of the park, but you could not buy a Tiki Room ticket. You had to actually go to the Tiki Room and buy it. And why? Because the books were separate for about a year. Um, and the money that the Tiki Room made its first year had to go to Walt, not to Walt Disney Productions, not to Walt Disney Studios, not to whatever. It had to go right back to Walt. So that's why. Um, that's
See,
that. Yeah.
you're struggling over which thing to mention, just
Because
and that
it's
there's
so
so
many.
many shows all the reasons why people need to read this book because there is just so many great stories.
I agree, Michelle.
One of the things you brought up in the book is the fact that it was kind of a huge thing in about the mid 20th century that the tiki craze just kind of
Oh,
took over pop culture everywhere,
yes.
and that it was showing up in all sorts of different aspects again across the country. I'm curious how you feel that craze kind of led Walt Disney and to lead the Imagineers in a direction that would eventually lead to the Enchanted Tiki Room.
Well, it was less about a room full of birds initially that put on a show for sure. When the idea was broached, it was just like we have we have to we have to now pay attention to updating Adventureland. Every other land in the park had already gone through a bit of a rethink. And Adventureland was the last, probably because when Adventureland opened at Disneyland, it was the most lavish area in the park at the time. So Adventureland finally around 1961 is like it's due for a makeover. And of course, with Hawaii about to, Hawaii being purchased, finally part of the United States formally, and the tiki craze that had been going on post-war forever, and even before that, like big surprise in the 19 whatever 30s, what was the most popular music in America? It was Hawaiian, well, Polynesian music, from Hawaii on the radio. And I was when I read that, I'm like, are you right? Really? It was. So it was inevitable that Adventureland was eventually going to get its own little tropical hideaway. And Lillian Disney, Walt's wife, always wanted a little tea room, and the idea was that it was going to be on Main Street, and then that was postponed, and then they were going to do an extension of Main Street, and maybe the tea room could go there, and no, that didn't eventually happen. And then, okay, well, let's make this little side area, this little hut, a tea room, a little cafe where a little dark, typical of its time, uh, little Tahitian tea room, and there Lillian can be happy. And then from there, it slowly became something completely different. Uh, Lillian again didn't get her tea room, um, but something else happened. Yeah, and that long, that long process where the idea just kept evolving. I talk about in great detail in the book. Yeah.
Yeah, actually, I think in telling that story there about how that it evolved from that kind of thought of having the tea room that it to me personally hearing you tell the story it was mind-boggling to think how much they pivoted because of how close they were to actually opening that restaurant.
Yeah. Yeah.
What were some of the
And
things
that,
that
and that's the other thing. Many people know this, but it was planned as a restaurant. I mean, it went from the tea room to actually a really bougie upscale. The idea being it was going to be a really bougie upscale restaurant. And one of the things was they were going to put on a little experience. It wasn't going to be a show, just kind of like in the spirit of Rainforest Cafe that we know today. It was just, oh, birds were going to be doing come to life and do a little thing. That was the next sort of step in the evolution. But Michelle, yeah, like you said, it was a restaurant. It was a restaurant for a very long time. And one of my dearest friends was reading the book and he wrote me a note going, Ken, I'm on page blah blah blah, well into the book, and it's still a restaurant. And that was like the best in sort of backhanded compliment I could have received because it really was like for the longest time it was going to be a restaurant. So it was like, when does this thing going to just become its own show? Like, and which was very last minute. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
One of the things I love that you talk about in the book is actually that there is still, I believe, still today, a little piece of that restaurant that is
Oh yeah. Oh
pretty
yeah.
front and center
Yeah.
to that show.
And last I understood, there's a laptop in it now. Going to be cutlery and napkins and glasses and cups and things that were going to be stored in the center, what the center fountain cabinet, basically. It's still a cabinet. Apparently, there's a laptop in there.
You'll have to read the book and find out exactly what that piece was at some point because I'm like, no, I'm never going to look at it the same way ever
And then
again.
there's some back, all those. There's four alcoves to the tiki room here in California. It's different in Florida because they could change things up. But yeah, in California there are four alcoves, and you can easily imagine a table being pushed in there and people sitting around having a meal in those alcoves with the other tables around. Um, yeah, so yeah, the longest time a restaurant. Yeah.
I also love that one of the things that you said, it was kind of a bougie restaurant, but the bougie restaurant for much of the time was going to be run by somebody who was a fast food giant, or not fast food, a frozen food giant. And
Not at the
nowadays,
time. Yeah, so Tom at the time, Stouffer's actually did run a series of actually really, I'm not bougie, but sort of family friendly, but really nice um restaurants, sort of on the eastern side. He was starting to branch out. This was before the frozen foods became a real big thing. So he was a respected name from Cincinnati. And yeah, the idea was that Stouffer's, who had already had a reputation as actually quality food, um, was going to run it. Yeah, and read all about it. It did not go well. Yeah.
So, as a storyboard artist yourself, did you find anything particularly fascinating in terms of insights on how the show was visually or narratively developed?
Yeah, in fact, the whole idea of it being a room full of animated birds was the product of a mistake. Well, not a mistake, but a miscalculation on the part of artist John Hench. Of course, they had ideas of what the place was going to look like on the outside, but Walt eventually was like, I need I need some images. In the same way we map out a film, we need to have some sort of visual inspirational sketches of what the place is going to look like inside. So, John, you get to it, and I'll get back in a week, and we'll have a meeting, and I'll take a look at your sketch. And John, without even giving it a second thought, just because put put in his sketch of what looked like every tiki bar ever, um, just some birds, some beautiful um, tropical birds roosting in the eaves, not knowing that this was going to become a point of contention. So Walt takes one look at it and he's like, immediately thinks this is not good. John, why are you putting birds up there? They're going to blank on the food. Again, the mythology says that Walt said they were going to poop on the food, and he did not use that word. Um, and John, who always wanted to please his boss and had no idea that these sort of decorative birds that he painted were going to be a thing, started to riff. He's like, "Oh no, they're stuffed birds. They're just decorative stuffed birds." And Walt then had another fit because there was already a major point of contention regarding anything related to taxidermy at the park. Um, Walt didn't believe something that was once alive should have its remains on display at Disneyland because it had you been done before. So he was like, we don't do stuffed birds at the park. And again, John is riffing, and then he just thinks, oh well, they're not real. They're going to be little mechanical birds. He hadn't thought of that, but he did at the moment. And of course, and again, as I set it up in the entire book, well, of course, Walt lights up because the idea of animated mechanical figures was intoxicating to him. The idea, like, then a door opens. And I know, Michelle, you love doors because, yeah, he like that lit him up. That absolutely lit him up. So then he's like, oh, mechanical person. And then everybody started riffing. People were like, well, yeah, if we put a bunch of birds in here, these birds could start to tweet, and then these birds over here could start to tweet, and then they start to talk to each other. And wow, for restaurant patrons, that could be kind of fun and cool. And they also knew that they could do it because they were developing another show that actually included mechanical birds at the time, which then was shelved. Um, so yeah, that's that's kind of that's how one sketch can actually launch an entire stream of ideas. Yeah.
Thankfully, somebody's quick on their feet to
That was
respond.
John. Yeah, who had a long history of like, of just of these sort of anxiety-inducing meetings with Walt, and John was always a little anxious around Walt, who just wanted to please him and just say the right thing. at all costs, even if it ended up being a bit of a problem down the road. He was.
It's interesting. I mean, you just talked about contentious moments, and I mean, your book is filled with some of these moments, some of these behind the scenes stories. There were a lot of creative differences. Paint colors, the feathers.
Paint pink. No,
Yeah.
brown, paint pink.
Do you
Art
have any
art
stories?
isn't easy.
Any stories? Obviously, you just talked about John Hinch a little bit. Any other stories that really stuck with you as far as some of these battles that went in Walt Disney Imagineering and with Walt himself?
Well, Walt was a grumpy guy, and the company is not too fond of make getting the word out on that one. And everybody was sort of used to it. Of course, he had his jolly moments, getting pinged. Which yeah. So which also like the Walt that everybody kind of knew that we know is old Uncle Walt from his TV show. And the surprise revelation there is that's not Walt, and Walt knew it. And initially, Walt and the kindly, non-smoking, uh, warm, fuzzy family man. He certainly was a wonderful family man for sure, but that wasn't a real reflection of him, and he was very well aware of it. Uncomfortable with the idea that that if he's ever seen in public, he's got to put on a show and be that for them. But that initial discomfort, then, eventually he was like, okay, he kind of bought into it and became more comfortable with but still was aware that that's not really who he was. So Walt was a bit of a grumpy man. I mean, he had chronic pain in his back. That's going to annoy anybody. Um, he could be short with people. He could be also warm. He never gave compliments. The best he could do is that'll do. Um, and uh, and yet people loved him and respected him because he gave them opportunities that you wouldn't normally get. And this was a through line that came to me all the time was the idea that people who had never ever attempted anything like on and on, people being asked to do something that they had never done before. But Walt believed in them, and for some magical, weird, extrasensory concept in his brain, believed that they could do and was right. Um, they did it. They knocked it out of the park. Like Wathel Rogers was the kind of the mechanical guru behind the entire show, and he was an animator. And all he was doing at the time, all Walt knew of him at the time was that um, he had these mechanical t toys that he created around his desk. And Walt knew that they came from Wavell, and he was like, I'm doing a show on uh with a bunch of mechanical birds. Wavell, you can do this." And of course, Wavell's like, "Okay," but of course, on the drive home and for the next few weeks, he's like, what, how do where do I begin?" And yet, he did it. And that's Waithel's stories. It runs the gamut of so many people in Imagineering and they were tasked with doing things no one had ever done before. Yeah. My
Yeah, and
respect for engineers is through the roof as well because that's what engineers do. It's a problem and it's a problem that no one's ever solved and they've got to solve it. So yeah.
yeah, and I like how you bring out the fact that when we look at traditional leadership and you're like, okay, here's the project, you do it. That wasn't Walt's style. He wasn't like what we now think of traditional leaders.
Yeah, he was handing out, yeah, he was in his way riffing. He was like, these are my people and I believe that they can do it. And and that's enough. If Walt believes I can do it, I'm gonna give it a go. Yeah. We don't, yeah. Um, yeah. And that was amazing. Walt knew how to cast people. He figured it out. And they were loyal to him. So he might be grumpy, but they were absolutely loyal to him because they knew that this something amazing was going to happen. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's one of the things that we've discovered recently. Not that we didn't know this going in, but I think it's been brought more to the forefront for us is that recently we took a tour in LA of many of the places that were early in Walt's life and getting to see, some of the places where he started out. It was very humanizing to see
Yeah.
Walt, start off, living with family and then living in a small apartment aboard, with some neighbors and so forth, as far as opposed to what we always see him as this grand person who has lived in these amazing estates and is on television.
Oh, no.
So, seeing
Parts
that and
that
then reading
wall.
your book also, it's more and more humanizing and
Yeah.
realizing, Walt, as amazing as he was not that much different than you and I and some of the things we had to
Yeah.
go
No, he was
through.
absolutely human. And one of the core sort of big revelations for me um, was that idea that I find very human, and I absolutely relate to it, and I know that I see it in my colleagues in animation and in so many people, is that so many of our passions as adults can sometimes be linked to what we didn't get as children. Um, that that idea of like that which was not that I didn't that I wanted so badly as a child, you make up for in adulthood, and that is pure Walt. Those people who, as adults, have stacks of toys on the back walls. That is often related to never having enough toys as a child. And there's a story of Walt, running as a young kid, running the paper route in his town. He had to wake up early in the morning, say three in the morning. And his father did not believe in the value of toys at all. He didn't get them as a child. His dad didn't believe in their value at all, and they couldn't afford them as well. Um, so Walt would see a bunch of toys on a door stoop before the sun came out, and he would stop his route and get on the stoop and play with them for a while, and then get back on his bike and move forward. That's really telling. That is Walt not seeking something and not getting it, then move that forward, and that really aligns with so much of the Walt that we later know, who is in a way his making up for lost time, that inner child in him, you know, quite frankly, uh, the Enchanted Tiki Room is the ultimate toy shop come to life. That is, in a weird way, a fulfillment of a of a of a lifelong dream and a childhood bereft of play. uh, those things that we take for granted ourselves, perhaps. So, yeah, and that's very human. That's very human. I relate to that. Like, I didn't get to go Disneyland I didn't get to go to Disneyland much, but there were no circuses in my childhood or parades or pageants that I ever went to. I didn't go to the theater. And my later life, boy, I went to the theater all the time, and when we did go to Disneyland, which was rare, that let's say the pageantry of Small World was in direct um, um, was a direct contradiction of the childhood that I had, which was kind of gray and colorless. Literally, I grew up in Palos Verdes, where the fog was all day, and so that color and pageantry lights you up, but in a way that feeds you the rest of your life, and you seek it out for the rest of your life. So that's Walt. That's Walt. You know, yeah,
And
Yeah.
just like us, so many ways.
yeah.
Yes.
In a way,
We're gonna start delving into therapy.
yeah. No, no. And it was a way, yeah. And he has fond memories of his childhood, of course. Um, um, because those little beats of joy and pleasure become all the more palpable, uh, because they're not that often. Um, so yeah, yeah. Yeah. So So yeah, in a way, yeah, back to the Tiki Room in its way being such a reflection of Walt.
Yes.
I say at the very end of the book, if you want to know Walt, if you really, really want to know Walt, of course there's Disneyland and but there's very few sort of Walt era jolts in there. But if you really want to know Walt, Tiki Room is your place. He's there. His spirit is very much there, which kind of in a way for Disney fans makes the Tiki Room, at least at Disneyland, kind of I don't know, for lack of a better word, kind of a sacred space. It is a reflection of pure Walt. Yeah.
Yeah. And you write that very beautifully in your book when you're, kind of tying that into Walt. I have to say, I did shed a tear.
Shed a tear. I was openly weeping down the I-95 as we were driving home when you spoke that line.
Oh,
Very, very touching.
well, I was like, I was writing the book going, this is like, I had no idea that in writing the book that I would get all the feels. It's like, it's an out of body experience, but I'm like, oh. Um, but I get it. Yeah, I get it.
Yeah,
Over
definitely.
all over a room full of mechanical birds.
Beautiful singing enchanted mechanical
Yes,
birds.
yes.
Yeah.
And no
So,
doubt, the elephant in the room is that the Tiki Room compared to anything in the park now is it's old school.
mhm.
It's clunky around the edges. It is technology from, the 60s. And technology for current shows and attractions is infinitely more complex, but there's still something, for me at least, that is utterly charming about that show and still works and the nostalgia is
Mhm.
still pure and sweet and it's kind of fun to go back in time and and wrap yourself into the comfort of that. Yeah.
Well, that definitely works for us. I mean, that's the way we feel when we go into it. But I have to say, it was just a couple years ago. We had some family come with us to Disneyland, and one of the members, my cousin, who is not that much younger than me, had
And
said,
he's been to Disneyland a fair amount.
but he said he'd never been inside the Enchanted Tiki Room, and we
We,
brought him in there, and we're like, so afterwards, what did you think? And he's like, that was phenomenal. I had no idea what I was missing all this time. It was incredible. So still today, going back to 1963, this
Yeah.
attraction still for people who have not experienced it still can bring joy and wonder to
That
this day.
as an
that
adult,
that sort of warms my heart. I took my jaded niece and nephews there. I think it was the first or second trip to Disneyland. Uh, and my niece said something that I loved because it's exactly what you should say. This is before the show even began. She sat there, she turned to me, and she said, "So, what is this?" And I was like, yes, because that's the joy of it. There are like, I argue there are 10 solid surprises in that thing, certainly for 1963 audiences, where they're like, what? And they roll out one after the other. That is a room that unfolds. And I loved the fact that she was in there going, what? We're sitting here facing, I don't know, a nondescript fountain. And of course, many of the birds are sort of in darkness, a little darkness. And yeah, so that what is this was perfect. And then, of course, by the end, she's like, wow, Ken, that was pretty great. Yeah. But that idea of like not knowing what you're in for, now go back to 1963 with the audiences going in there and seeing this thing for the first time, all the more like, whoa, yeah, that wonderful sense of surprise. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the things that really stood out in the book was just how ambitious this project became, especially considering none of this was done before, and the technology that they had back then was not like what we have
Yeah.
today. I mean, remarkable how they pulled that off.
Yeah, they were borrowing from the U.S. Defense Department. Like, how do we do this? And 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 also your use of the word became is very well chosen because again, it started as one thing and then just kept becoming. Um, uh, but yeah, so the only sort of animatronic tech they had at the time was based kind of on clockwork, the idea of winding something up and then it runs its cycle. So that's kind of cam based tech, and all you need to know about a cam is it's just that it's a round thing, and that round thing as it rolls past whatever a reader, let's say, um, a very analog reader, makes a character do something for maybe upwards, maybe tops, several minutes, but rarely that. And that's all, again, clockwork, because that's all anybody knew up to that time. So, how do we do a musical review with 200 animated figures that is 17 minutes long? What? How? What? Huh? And the U.S. Defense Department had figured a bit of that out using audio tape and pulse tech and uh, no one, yeah, no one does anything remotely like that now, but it's all with computers. And that was brand new, and layering on these tones onto audio tape that a device could read and then trigger a separate movement. So that was all brand new. So again, when people walked into the Tiki Room, they'd seen little mechanical toys put on a little performance for 20 seconds, but an entire multi-track audio and animation extravaganza where there's choreographed lighting and effects and animation. They were blown to the back of the bus. It was mind-blowing. And that was again using Defense Department hardware and well, software in a sense that the government wasn't needing anymore, and they'd already moved on to the next thing. Um, that they had used it, the government had used it to choreograph, um, say, testing devices for a Polaris missile or choreograph a sequence of launch cues where latches and things had to open and close at a certain time. So that's what they were using it for. And they'd already moved on to other tech. And so this was a garage sale that was too good to pass up for Walt and his people, and they jumped on it. And that was what allowed the Tiki Room to do its thing with all that clunky hardware in the basement. Yeah.
The wires and
Yeah. Yeah. The wires, the pneumatic tubes, the air hoses. Each of
yeah,
those birds had up to five little tiny air hoses.
unbelievable.
I
Yeah.
love also you brought up the equipment in the basement. And one of the things everybody loves about the Enchanted Tiki Room, especially here in Florida, is the wonderful AC that you get to. Not only do you get a magical show, but you also get the magical air conditioning. Well, that wasn't just to cool people off to begin with. That was for something else when they originally opened the Enchanted Tiki Room,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. They weren't. The Enchanted Tiki Room, when it was a restaurant before it was like, oh, we need a basement. Um, Not going to have air, there was no plan for air conditioning. In fact, they were probably going to be opening up the windows and letting an air breeze come in. Um, and in fact, if you go to Disneyland, the Tiki Room, there's a river that runs along it, but that river was going to go under it. So the Tiki Room was going to be on stilts. So when they're like, we need room for equipment, those stilts became just the four end walls for what became the basement, and then the river was rerouted. So there was going to be a beautiful, cute, lazy river running under the Tiki Room. So that was conveniently found space. And yeah, so that stuff ran hot. You probably are very familiar with vacuum tubes. Those things get hot and they burn out. There were many, 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 many vacuum tubes that needed to be on and running to keep that show running. And yeah, and if it went too hot, then there'd be a fire. So they had to keep it cool for sure.
Definitely.
And the
Uh,
people above got the benefit of that. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Amazing, amazing. Um, in your opinion, what does this attraction represent in the larger story of Disney Parks history?
It is again the most consequential attraction at the park. It changed everything in ways that no other attraction really did. Not just in the tech, but in the tone. Disneyland was a playful area, but it wasn't a place full of enchantment. The Jungle Cruise was more like a true life adventure based on the true life adventure series of the day. So even though it was lighthearted, it was still about here's some information about a hippo. The Tiki Room gave Disneyland full reign to be a place of enchantment and a place of humor and joy. Uh, the Tiki Room, along and arguably with a few other things, Mark Davis, animator turned Imagineer Mark Davis, was doing with the Jungle Cruise. From that point on, had a smile on his face. There now could be animated figures. There could be a lighthearted quality about Disneyland, and Disneyland could be a place where legitimate magic in three dimensions can happen before you. So it not only changed things technologically and allowed, for, a new jolt of very sophisticated attractions at the park, but again, it changed the tone of Disneyland overnight, and arguably became the Disneyland that we know today that you would not have recognized previously. Um, I always, I argue if you were to go back to the magical first weeks of Disneyland, it would be kind of unrecognizable, and really, in in some sense, very not in some sense, it was unfinished. There would be areas that would not be pretty to you, piles of dirt and hardware and chain link fence and weeds. It was a park that was struggling as well for many weeks. There were many days where it wasn't open all the time. It wasn't open late at night. It was open a few days, and there were days where it wasn't doing well. So the Tiki Room helped to change that. There were a few other things, of course, but the Tiki Room was a huge part of, oh, this is a place unlike anything we've ever seen before. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's incredible, and definitely all this and so much more comes out in your book. I need to touch on one more thing though before we let you go.
You're letting me
Obviously,
go?
I'm sorry to say your time with us is done.
We're going
You
to
can't
unlock
do
that
that.
door.
Share your efforts.
I was going to read you the book.
Well, now we go. Let's settle in, everybody.
You can't
Um,
let me go. No, I'm just getting started.
well, before we do that, we did need to ask you about the Sherman brothers because
Yes.
we all know that the Sherman brothers played a part in this as well. But what I don't think Michelle knew and I didn't know is how late in the game the Sherman brothers were brought in to be a part of the show. And not only that, it was also that it was really for an extremely important purpose that maybe this show was missing as during its development that they needed
Oh,
to bring in
there
their,
are
their
three or four
magic.
stages, and 3 or 4 stages between. This is not a show. This is a happening. This is just like a thing. You're eating, and then, oh, this sort of magical thing happens, and then it's over. And it just kept getting more audacious and crazy as it went. Um, they were even having debates about like, and also the thing it didn't the earlier version didn't have four MCs. None of the birds talked. There was a brief moment where some of the flowers actually spoke in English, but it was very briefly. The birds on the Birdmobile did not sing. They tweeted. It was not a show. It was just a thing that happened. And in that thing, and the totems would chant. And in that thing, in that context, it got to a point where it was audacious and over the top, and still not a show, just a presentation, but it was kind of surreal. And Walt, Walt started to bend to this is too outrageous to be. And for the longest time, it didn't even have like links to the numbers. It was like there was no announcer, and then the next song is blah blah blah. There was none of that. It just happened while you were eating. Um, but again, as it got more audacious and more crazy over time, and there are reasons for why that happened as well, Walt was like, we need to turn this into something that's more of a traditional show, which meant we need to get a writer in to give these four macaws who, again, were just there. They weren't personalities at all. They were just birds. We're going to give them personalities. We're going to crack jokes. We're going to announce one number after another. And previous to the Sherman Brothers' involvement, if you were to watch the show, and they did, by the end of it, you would be like, this, what is this? There was no, that was the line. It actually didn't come from the Sherman Brothers. It came from the another another person brought into that particular meeting who was going to be writing jokes for the beginning number. So the opening number originally was going to be the Barcarolle, which was like lights dim and then gently this sort of operatic number. The birds slowly wake up. That was how the original presentation opened. The Shermans were brought in to write a number that actually explained what this thing was and what people were in for, and the tone of the show, that this was going to be funny and silly, so that by the end, when the drummers are chanting and the lightning storm is happening, people aren't freaking out and or terrified. They know that this is part of a more lighthearted show. Yeah, so if you listen to the opening Tiki Room song, it explains it. It's a show. It's a tropical hideaway. The birds sing words. The flowers croon. Um, and and it's a show with an audience. And yeah, so that changed everything. That became the opening number that turned it from a happening to a full-on musical review. And they were not tasked with um, the Sherman Brothers were not tasked with writing the corny interstitial jokes. That was uh, Mr. Clemens. I forget now. I'm wondering what his first name is.
It's not Ron.
Larry?
Larry. Yeah.
Larry Clemens. Uh, and the Shermans were like, yeah, and these are the worst jokes of all time. Don't blame us. Uh, uh, but that's how the opening number came about, because it was Walt last minute shifting this thing into a full-on musical review. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah. What a great job the
Yeah.
team did. Yeah. 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 Okay, well, if listeners could take away one appreciation after reading your book, what would you hope it would be?
That this is a show that is museum worthy. You'll get from Imagineers all the time. Disneyland is not a museum. We need to continue to be relevant. Walt is dead. You missed it. They will say, relevance is important. They're right. There's this is true in many respects. Um, but what if something at Disneyland became in its way recognized as a pop culture masterwork? What if something at Disneyland was in its way uh, museum worthy? This is important. What if that happens? What do we do with it at Disneyland? How do we move forward with it? Um, are some things worth preserving because they are artistically va valuable? Um, is the Tiki Room a pop culture masterwork? And my book is in its way an argument saying, yes, it is. It is absolutely that important. Maybe you do take it away, but you don't, but you just move it somewhere. Um, in writing the book, you have no idea when you get involved in something this intimately, how personal it becomes to you, in as much as I had more I'm going to call them nightmares, more dreams than you can possibly imagine, where I go to the Disneyland, I go to whatever, I go to Disneyland and the Tiki Room is gone, or it's gutted, or it's the birds are shredded and they're taking it down. Like this was constant. It sounds insane, and it is, that how many dreams I had. So there was this fear that I'm, there was this fear that I better get this book out to help people realize how important this thing is before they take it down. And there's been buzz, there were many moments where it came close to being turned into a stroller parking lot. Um, or those tikis are inappropriate because they're whatever, cultural appropriation, and whatever, and that terrified me because it is to me a very, very important space at the park, and it changed not just the history of Disneyland. It changed theme park theme theme park history across the country, overnight. So
Well,
it is that important.
yes. And as you even pointed out in your book, it even impacted the music industry and how recordings took place and things like that, that technology was beneficial in other areas.
Yeah. And the other point is, I used to sit in the tiki room many years ago, and I'd watch people leave. After a few minutes, the exit doors would open and they'd be gone. And I always thought to myself, if I could just run after you, sit you down, and tell you why this thing was
Mhm.
important and why you should stay there and see it in a different light. If I just told you the story about it, you wouldn't have left. And in a way, that book was fueled by that too. In the same way that I'm an art history nerd, and we all walk through art museums and we go, that's pretty, that's pretty, that's pretty, that's pretty. But if and then we go get a coffee somewhere. But if you just stopped and focused maybe on one piece of art, and maybe asked a curator there or whatever, tell me the story about this. Why is that individual wearing red, and what does this mean, and where the history and the context and the artist. Then it becomes something special and unique and valuable. And in a way, the Tiki Room deserves that. It deserves someone, I guess it became me, to go, this is why this thing is so important. And I hope that with this story you can recognize a new angle about it, and so that when you do go, you don't feel like you need to rush for the exit after 3 minutes. It's that important. It's a handcrafted piece of art,
Mhm.
um, where a team of people were doing the impossible.
And your book is a handcrafted work of art. I'm
Yeah.
telling you, we learned so much from it. We were so fascinating in it. And you heard Ken talk there. We're concerned too. Will the Walt Disney's Enchanted Tiki Room exist? I think everybody needs to purchase a copy of this book, read it for yourself, and then be sure and drop it off at Josh Tomorrow's desk going forward to make sure he knows how important the Enchanted Tiki
I
Room
would
is to
love it
all
if
of us.
Josh read it. Yeah, it might help him moving forward.
We'll do the Rudy move with your book to Josh's office.
Well, Kim Bruce, thank you so much for coming on and sitting here. You've been so generous with your time, talking all about your book, Before the Birds Sang Words. People, you can pick it up. We'll have a link in our show notes. You have your own website for it. It's tikiroom63.com. You can find it there. Also, are there other places maybe they can follow you on social media or any place else that you want
Um,
people to know about?
Book also available on Amazon and Kindle, and in audiobooks as well. Yeah, there's an Instagram. I forget my Instagram link, but I post from there to time when I have a little blurb and fun thing to talk about, like a
We'll share
recent.
that in the show
Be
notes
sure
and
that,
stuff.
and it
Yeah.
links from your website too.
Yeah, yeah,
So,
yeah. Yeah, and I give talks from time to time. I need to get information on that on the website and maybe through Instagram. Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Well, it was great. And thank you so much for the time. And again, the book is incredible, incredible. Please, please, please check it out, right, Michelle?
Yeah.
Thank
Check
you,
it out.
Tom. Thank you, Michelle.
Oh, thank you. And we want to remind everybody after you read that book, go in. It's really important to give those reviews. And it's really easy on Amazon. You just scroll down to the bottom and there's a button that says write a review. Go ahead and do that because it's also very important.
Yes, yeah, do that, please. Yeah, it helps. Every little bit helps. It's not about me. I'm making zero money from this book. Let me tell you, I'm still in debt with all the research I did. And that's fine. It's not about me. It is about the story, and it's about celebrating the show and the people that put it together. And it is a really great story, I think. Yeah.
It is.
It is. And it's a great book. And we love that show. And we're even after reading that book, we're going to love it even that much more the next time we go see it. And all the times, hopefully for a long period of time after that. Ken, Bruce, thank you so much again for joining us on the show. Thank you for being so generous with your time. And hopefully we can bring you back on in the future, whether to talk about this, anything else you're working on in the future, or maybe a little bit
I'm there for you anytime. Yeah. You want to chat? I'm there. Absolutely there for you. And Tom, thank you so much. The Star Wars fan, and Michelle, the white door fan with silver.
I like that there's doors to open, Ken.
Exactly.
Always doors to open.
Exactly. There is a valuable metaphor that we need to explore regarding doors and the possibilities beyond them.
It's like a white canvas. You can put whatever you want there, beyond the doors, on the walls.
I love it. You guys are
Schroeder's
great,
cat.
and I am honored that you allowed me to yammer here about a subject that is goofy but delightful, and the honor is all mine for sure. You guys are delightful. Thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time again. Ken Bruce, the book again, Before the Birds Sang Words. Thank you again for being on board the Hyperion Adventures podcast.
You guys are great.